looking at some of these players that have a limited time left as starters. Like Giovanni Bernard at some point is going to be surpassed by their other RB1. At some point, guys like Duke Johnson, somebody hit me up over the weekend in my league of record because I had Duke Johnson trying to work out a deal. I was able to, I tried to get Rob Gronkowski from him, I thought, which was a fair trade because he already had another tight end. He didn't quite want to do that. So anytime you have somebody with a limited time opportunity, it's like when you have a gift card that's about to expire. Like if you have like airline points or something like that, where you're like, oh, this might expire. Now, Mike Davis apparently is going to have an extended run. His top billing, although he's got injury concerns of his own, so hold the phone on that. But no, guys like that, Eric Young, the Impact World Champion, tried to trade me Mike Davis a couple of weeks ago when Christian McCaffrey was getting closer to returning. This Christian McCaffrey thing, I have one of my best teams with Christian McCaffrey. We're 8-2. Because I include everybody. We're 8-2 without McCaffrey doing much this season. I know that he's got a bye in week 13. I'm angling for a bye. If I can get into the playoffs and then McCaffrey gets healthy, 15 and 16, that's totally cool with me. So you do what you got to do. But I think those are the kind of players that you should be looking to move right now.
I'm looking at moving some guys that certainly have some name brand value, maybe have underperformed, but also have some tough schedules. The first one that came to mind to me was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So it's not like you're, offering up some guy who's just a curtain jerk or anything like that. I mean, this is a guy who's going to get some opportunities, but the schedule down the stretch isn't particularly great. And even though he is still the lead running back, Le'Veon Bell's still getting some opportunities and some touches. So that sort of diminishes his opportunity a little bit. But I think if you're offering him up there, you're not just basically saying, here, have this guy who never gets off my bench and give me something good back in return. So I think he's one that I would consider kind of putting out there in an offer. The other one is Kenny Golladay, who has sort of dealt with some injuries over the last couple of weeks. But we know that when he is healthy, he's going to get plenty of love in that passing game from Matthew Stafford. We know that he's going to be probably the top target in the Lions offense. But again, the schedule down the stretch is not particularly good. And I do sort of wonder about this hip injury long term and what this means for his health coming back. So you're again sort of offering up a guy that does have some value, does have some intrigue. You don't have to tell the other person that you don't like his schedule. You don't have to mention that you're sort of worried about the Lions kind of collapsing down the stretch. That part is up to them to research. You just put out there that you're offering up a quality player and seeing what you can get in advance, or in return, I should say. Speaking of getting a return, who are some guys that people should probably try to trade for over the next few days?
Well, this is going to be easier said than done. I'm actually looking at this right now because my friend Scotty, he's been hitting me up today because I have Justin Herbert as my backup quarterback in the league of record. I have Aaron Rodgers, and then I knew where Rodgers was going to have a bye week or he was having something. For whatever reason, I had that, because I'm good at this. I picked up Justin Herbert, and I've not let him go, and I don't want to trade him. And people are like, well, what do you want? Like, I'm looking at his roster right now. I'm like, if you want to give me Travis Kelce for him, then we can do that. So that I think that looking at somebody, like, it's going to be difficult. I'm playing a little bit of defense, and I'm not giving him away because Scott's actually a really good fantasy player. And if he didn't win last year, he's won in the last couple of years. Like, I don't want you to be better. Like, there's also that whole thing too. Like, it's cool to target Justin Herbert. I'm not necessarily going to give him up. Even if I never use him, I know that that's 25 points that a potential opponent of mine is not using. So I don't know. I know that we're not running B-roll, so I'm probably not saying what I told our producers. So I'm sorry if I threw a curveball to the production team here. But it really is just one of those things. Like, Herbert, to me, is somebody that you would look at and be like, that's what I would want. You might not necessarily get him, but I think that a lot of people who have him have another quarterback that they're grappling with. So if you need to upgrade at that position, although it's always difficult to trade for quarterbacks because you can usually stream them, but I think Herbert is the exception there.
So I had a couple guys on my list, and much like the guys I'm trading away, I'm sort of keeping an eye on schedules, and it's always harder to sort of acquire really talented, productive guys down the stretch, but it is worth kind of making an offer. And one was Gronk. I've sort of come around on Rob Gronkowski this year because at the start of the year, I just honestly didn't know what to expect. And I sort of stayed away from him in drafts because I was just underwhelmed by what his potential could be. And here's the thing. He's not putting up those classic Gronk games like we saw in New England all those years. But, nowadays to be a top 10 tight end, you really only need like 5 catches for 40 yards and then maybe a touchdown. And so he's doing that and then some, and has a very favorable schedule down the stretch. It's going to be hard to trade for him just because people who have a quality tight end are going to understandably hoard that productive tight end. So that it means that you have to up the offer a little bit. But I think it's worth getting him if you can try to slide him into your roster for the end of the season. The other one for me is Kareem Hunt. And I say this as someone having pulled off recently a straight up Jonathan Taylor for Kareem Hunt trade.
Veto.
I couldn't hit accept on that offer fast enough. Look, maybe there's somebody out there in your league who looks around and says, well, hey, that now that Nick Chubb is back, Kareem Hunt's not going to get so much work, which I guess is true. But Rank, you pointed out, and I also found this out myself, that Kareem Hunt is actually more productive fantasy-wise when Nick Chubb is in the lineup. Maybe it's because the Browns can play matchups a little bit more and get him in some favorable situations. Whatever it is, he actually is scoring more fantasy points per game with Nick Chubb than without him. And so maybe somebody's a little bit spooked, or maybe somebody's just sort of out of the race and you can sort of make some deals or whatever. But Kareem Hunt's kind of a nice option, I think, the rest of the way. Again, going to be hard to acquire him because people who are paying attention know what he's doing, but it's always worth the ask. I mean, if you don't ask, the answer's automatically no, right? So
I feel like you were shading me a little bit, like where you're like, hey, you actually figured this out. Whatever. I won't take that as a slight, but I do think with guys like Kareem Hunt, and I think Chase Edmonds could even eventually fall into this category too. I always say it's like tag team wrestlers, that sometimes these guys are just better as in a tag team. Like Badass Billy Gunn was better as part of the New Age Outlaws, even when they tried to put him over as a single star, mostly because The Rock obliterated him. But, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I think it's, if it works out better, like, what do I care? Like, fine, take less snaps and score more points. I'm into it. And again, like somebody did that to me. Like, actually, I know I keep going back to my league of record, but people try to get Kareem Hunt when Nick Chubb came back. The guy who has Nick Chubb's like, hey, I'm sure you don't want him anymore. I'm like, bro, like I do that. Like, you're not going to, where do you think you're getting this information that you think you're going to pull a fast one on me? But yeah, I think but I, for exactly the reason that you said, like most people don't, like people are just having fun. They're like, yeah. And they'll be like, oh yeah, Nick Chubb's back. I'll trade him away. So take advantage of that where you can.
Absolutely. I feel like we sort of got into what we're looking for when we make a trade. I mean, that was going to be my next question, but I feel like we sort of talked about that to give people an idea of how to make some deals. So I guess that means I think I'm going to try to
do that Duke Johnson for Rob Gronkowski thing again. I got
my
NFL fantasy app right now. Let me see if I can pull this off during the break.
Cool. In the meantime, I'm going to say that was Fast Connections presented by Verizon, so we can fly the graphic up there. I also decided to put this out to the folks on Twitter because we know that people have trade questions, so I asked for a few, and so we'll kind of answer a couple of them here. One's from Art. If we can throw that one up on the screen. Art asking, do you get rid of CMC? And if so, what's an acceptable trade? RB1, wide receiver 1? Is that asking for too much? Obviously, throwing in the fact now that we know McCaffrey's not going to play in Week 11. But this is not the first time I've heard somebody ask if they should try to trade Christian McCaffrey.
No, and I completely understand where they're coming from. And I touched on this a moment ago where I was talking about a team that I have that's 8-2 with Christian McCaffrey not doing much of anything. And I feel really good about that roster, and I'm looking at him as a luxury piece. But if you're a team, let's say if you're in a good spot and you can afford to get rid of a couple of players, you're pretty much assured of the playoffs and want a deal for Christian McCaffrey, I like that. If Art's in a spot where he's scuffling to get into the playoffs and you really need to start looking week to week, then yeah, I can understand going and making the trade. And the person you should be looking at is the guy or girl who's already in first place and see if they would take Christian McCaffrey and be like, hey, you've got a great squad right now. Why don't I take Kareem Hunt off your hands or whatever deal you want to make? And I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
And my thing was, you're asking what's too much to ask for. My thought is
nothing.
Ask for what you want, right? Just ask for what it is you want. And if the other person's willing to negotiate, then you can come to an agreement of something that I think works for both of you. But, go in there with a wish list and, if you need $5, don't ask for 3, ask for 10, ask for the moon and then work down to something that you find is acceptable. So that's probably the advice there. Next question comes from Mike, who asks, fair value to move Nick Chubb 1-for-1 for a wide receiver?
Yeah, I would believe so. I mean, again, this goes back to the point of you've played so long without Nick Chubb. You've already picked up running backs who are probably doing pretty well for you. I don't believe it's a bad option, but at the same time, it's so much easier to replace a wide receiver than it is to replace a running back. And now you look at what Nick Chubb did in his first game, and I understand he was going against the Houston Texans, which I believe coming into that game had given up the most fantasy points per game, or they'd given up the most rushing yards. I knew they were very generous to running backs, so you don't want to expect that maybe every week. I really, though, believe that Nick Chubb is a league-winning type of running back, even going out of bounds here. Why are you showing this? Thank you for cutting that off. I really do believe that I just want to hang on to him. I just don't like moving running backs. We were just talking about Christian McCaffrey, but McCaffrey's not playing. Chubb's back and he's playing for you. And I think having that kind of depth works out to your benefit.
Yeah, I would just say, if you're moving Nick Chubb, that means you have some really good depth at running back, because this is a guy that, I think he has the potential. I think he's easily going to be a top 10 running back the rest of the year, maybe even a top 5 running back. And that's really hard to find. But there's certainly no doubt that if you wanted to move him for a wide receiver, you could get a very quality receiver back in exchange. But I would much rather have Nick Chubb on my roster.
Yeah, you got to be looking at a Tyreek Hill type of player. Like you've got to be shooting for the stars if you're doing that. I know, and we're looking at the remaining games too. With the Ravens, I don't know the Ravens are there looming, but gosh, these games against the Jags and the Titans make it worth it to hang on to them. Even in a tough game against the Ravens, you're probably going to roll the dice. I don't know. You'll probably either have to wear a 10-point game from him or else, bench him. But I would probably, even thinking that far ahead, I think I'm still starting him against the Ravens.
I'm still putting them in the lineup. That's just me. Next one from Julian, who is asking, what do I do with Lockett and Connor? They've lost value and have lost the last few weeks because of low production. I feel like Lockett is maybe a better option than James Conner, but that's just me.
Yeah, the one thing that concerns me about James Conner, and I believe that you were talking about this on NFL Fantasy Live on Tuesday, it might have been Overreaction Theater about Connor being the RB2 on his team. Was that you? Did I read that to you?
That was me. Yeah, that was
okay.
me.
So I read that to you. Okay. By the way, and I love that bit, by the way, because I always play it like I'm the one saying it, even though it's really you. I don't know. It's a nuance. I know I'm going inside the actor's studio here. But the one thing that really concerns me about James Conner, not that you can do much about it, but they go to Chase Claypool so much. Like, he is almost their goal line running back. Like, we've seen that a lot with wide receivers and quarterbacks. Usually it's a quarterback, where it's like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, who's Cam Newton, who's taking away production from running backs. You don't have to worry about that with Ben Roethlisberger, but Chase Claypool is certainly there enough to make it a concern. So, unfortunately, I feel like you're going to have to start him unless these are your two flex options. And if that's the case, I would just go with Tyler Lockett.
I would tend to lean on Lockett because I feel like he's going to be more productive, I think. If you're really worried about it, though, Julian, maybe I'd suggest trying to package them and bring in somebody who can fill your flex spot more consistently. I think there are some guys out there that are worthy of sort of adding to your roster. Look, check your strength of schedules. See who's going to have a good playoff schedule. Always important to look who's on the schedule weeks 14, 15, and 16. And try to make some deals there. So, sometimes it's better just to get rid of the concern, get rid of the headache, and not have to worry about it. All right, last one. This one from Logan, who says, thinking about making a trade offer for Michael Thomas, willing to give up Cooper Kupp or Kenny Galladay. Thoughts on that?
No, I would love to do that. I would love to do anything to get Michael Thomas on my roster. This probably should have been a player we were talking about and players to trade for. Actually, I knew that Logan was going to ask this question. That's why I didn't talk about him before. But this is absolutely one of the players that you can see fantasy managers being upset with him, maybe looking at the injury concerns at quarterback and saying, I don't want anything to do with Michael Thomas down the stretch. And then you're the one who can come in and be the beneficiary and getting that production, because he's still one of the best receivers in the game. Jameis Winston last year led Chris I'll get it. I'll spit it out. Hold on. Chris Godwin had a very good season last year with Jameis Winston as his starting quarterback. So I do not worry about that in the least. Teddy Bridgewater came in last year. Michael Thomas still set the NFL record for receptions in a season. So the quarterback situation doesn't concern me at all. See if that person's scared and try to convince them that Kenny Galladay is probably the way to go. Like Kenny Galladay, try to say that they're the basic same person. Like, oh, they're the same guy. Like, let's make this switch. I mean, I think Galladay's amazing. Don't get me wrong, but he's got his injury concerns too. So I think that's a pretty good idea.
I do think it's hard to believe Michael Thomas is going to struggle this much for the entire season, and you're waiting for that big breakout game to happen. And I just said you should probably trade away Kenny Galladay. So I guess following my own logic,
there it is.
Then there it is. You should make that deal. So there it is.
It would be weird if you didn't say it now.